Postmodernism shifted the world of architecture, art, literature, and philosophy by creating the non-straightforward. As Professor Joseph Godlewski mentions in Introduction to Architecture, postmodernism questions modern assumption about social progress, human reason, and a fixed notion of truth. It is skeptical about universalism, stable identities, and a singular conceptions of meaning. In the 60s and 70s, new technologies and ideas came and spread about faster than ever, and people became skeptical towards modernism and what it represents. In architecture, societal changes raised the question of whether modern architecture was meeting the needs of the present. This question led to new ideas and practices that were not deemed as acceptable, based on traditional philosophies, and postmodernism, a movement that started as a critique against modernism but was later found inspirational to social historical context, was born. Like any other novel idea, postmodernism has its proponents and opponents. Besides American architect Michael Graves, Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi, architects and theorists who experimented with architectural forms that appealed to a wider audience, used historical references, and celebrated pop culture, also led the change. David Harvey, a prominent British geographer and anthropologist, goes against postmodernism in architecture. Despite various opinions around this topic, the postmodern emphasis on sensibility has the necessity to exist. The Portland Municipal Service Building, which was designed by architect Michael Graves, is considered one of the first major postmodernist works. Its monumental, colorful facade contrasts the functional, modern architecture that was dominating the architecture scene in the 1980s. Graves claims that the building is a symbolic gesture, an attempt to re-establish a language of architecture and values that are not a part of modernist homogeneity. The decorative facade design reflects the classical anthropomorphic orders representing the base, the body, and the head. The building itself cleverly creates a connection between the past and the present by reinterpreting classical elements through the overscaled keystone, plastiers, and belvederes. The colors on the building's facade were used to represent elements from nature. For example, the green base was used to symbolize the ground, while the fake blue ribbon to symbolize the sky. However, the building was criticized harshly for incorporating traditional aesthetics without making the actual elements functional. As a response, Graves playfully exclaimed, "I thought, why are they so upset? Modernism has given them a choice between the vertical and horizontal, white, gray, or black. Come on." After much debate on this controversial building, the Portland building won an honor from the American Institute of Architecture in 1983. Graves has set forth the importance of utilizing decoration in structure rather than just focusing on functions like modernism did. David Harvey researched deep into postmodernism, especially in urban planning, and provides a broad context for it. In his book, The Condition of Postmodernity, Harvey is skeptical towards postmodernism. These changes, when set against the basic rule of capitalistic accumulation, appear more as a shift in surface appearance rather than a sign of emergence of some entirely new post-capitalistic or post-industrial society. He points out that urban spectacles mask the real geography via the construction of images. He considers this a kind of practice out of the evident fascination with surfaces. Harvey makes a connection between architecture and urban design by suggesting that both believe in the same concept of space, considering space independent, can be shaped for aesthetic aim and other purposes that are not necessarily functional, while modernism perceives space as something breakable in order to serve functional needs. Thus, postmodern urban planning does not believe in planning according to functional zones, but seeks pluralistic strategies for approaching urban developing as a collage of highly differentiated spaces and mixtures. Harvey is critical of this, suggesting that postmodernism fails to realize its promise of variety and easily falls into monotony and gentrification, marginalizes the poor into a new and quite nightmarish postmodern landscape of homelessness. Harvey's concerns have their ground, yet Denise Scott Brown, one of the front-runners in the postmodernism movement, has another explanation for these phenomenons. Brown sees postmodernism as a much-needed positive change in the culture of architecture. This method of architectural design pulled the basis of creation closer to research than ever before, with a large emphasis on studying the present, including cultural values and pop culture. In learning from pop, Brown's dynamic article about how architecture needs to adapt to the present, she asks, if high-style architects are not producing what people want or need, who is, and what can we learn from them? The question focuses on satisfying people, which Brown breaks down into the idea of pluralism of need, or the variations of needs between groups defined by income range, age, family, and lifestyle. The trouble is having architects comprehend and provide for groups they may have no understanding of. The solution to this, as stated in the title of the article, is having architecture reflect pop culture, considered low culture by many traditionalists. Therefore, in response to Harvey's doubts, Brown suggests that postmodern architecture reflects reality in a more and more globalized, diverse world, and it is not just fascination with surfaces. By looking into pop culture and reflecting upon it in their work, architects would be able to stay relevant to people's needs by forming a formal vocabulary of the present. In addition to these technologies and processes, Brown argues ideas about form determine architectural form as well, and form cannot arise from function alone, but rather that form follows inter alia, function, forces, and form. These statements hold true to much of postmodernist thought, both that architecture needs to contribute to a variety of needs and that function can be much broader than what it is believed in modernist thought, which can be viewed in greater expanse by looking to Brown's husband, Robert Venturi's theory and their practice together. Venturi is one of the most outstanding theorists who worked to steer architecture away from the modernist idea. In the late 1950s, Venturi designed a house for his mother by reinterpreting the archetypal suburban home as a contemporary architectural statement. Its influence was so great that it is now credited as the first postmodern building. Venturi best explains function and its relationship with form through the now famous duck versus decorated shed discussion. Venturi draws the duck part of his argument from a duck-shaped building on eastern Long Island that, which fittingly, sells ducks and duck eggs. To put it simply, the duck is a symbol for what the building represents. The exterior reflects the purpose of the building, where function defines form. Decorated sheds, on the other hand, are buildings that operate independently from their function. The only thing that defines its function is its respective signage or branding. Venturi, through studying the Las Vegas Strip, drew the conclusion that the decorated shed was the more effective of the two polar opposites. Therefore, Venturi argues that function follows form. Venturi's position on the long-debated topic can be further observed through projects such as the Guidehouse, which is basically a brick house with ornate decorations. Though Venturi refrained from calling himself a postmodernist, as he viewed the category as an agglomeration of architects that were anti-modernism, he was able to distinguish what made modernism so different from postmodernism. Modernists encourage expressionism of architectural elements, structure, and function. By limiting itself to strident articulation of the pure architectural elements of space, structure, and program, modern architecture's expression has become a dry expressionism, empty and boring, and in the end, irresponsible. Ironically, the modern architecture of today, while rejecting explicit symbolism and frivolous applique ornament, has distorted the whole building into one big ornament. In substituting articulation for decoration, it has become a duck. Postmodernism has a necessity to exist. It is not merely a critique of modernism, but also explores otherness that modernism opposes, embraces aesthetic pleasures that is largely neglected since the Enlightenment. It certainly has shortages that are not negligible and falls toward modernism in some aspects. Postmodernism is a way of thinking that rediscovers the importance of the sentiment part of modern life. Existence reminds people of the value of art and how it has shaped people's lives and thinking in this era of factories, mass production, and standardization. Though many characteristics of postmodernist architecture are prevalent today, and this term becomes somehow symbolic, architecture should not forget its essential idea: to address the needs of the present and adapt diverse aesthetics which gives emphasis to unique form and an extension of postmodernist thought.